My name is David Daniel Ball, and these are the headlines for Tuesday, the 10th of February, 2009. It will get worse, Brumby confirms fears as death toll hits 173. $950 to be blown on pokies and plasma TVs. Parliamentary hostilities on hold. Prisoners called on to help with the fire effort. South Australia's Operation Nomad credited with preventing bushfires. Fire officials stand by stay and defend policy. Boy charged with indecent exposure and assault. One of Australia's darkest days, says Gillard. Teen killed as police handcuff him on the road. Bushfire appeal raises $10 million. Victorian arsonist to be charged with murder. Patel's poor surgery costs lives, says court. Australia's worst ever disaster makes global headlines. Missing boys' parents don't walk the crocodile put down. Churchill fire threatening communities. And in comments, some light humour from Tim Brunero. Are the Victorian bushfires the beginning of global warming? Climate change will cause bushfire conditions to worsen in the decades ahead, and it's time the deniers woke up to it, according to Tim Brunero. Thank you, Tim. Good to know what fools think so as to not copy them. Arsonists as terrorists, Why the Laws Must Change by Alan Jones. Well, through all this horrific tragedy in Victoria, deadly infernos, people coming to terms with huge losses, they can't go home, there is no home. What do? Where do they go? Nature has turned on them with such ferocity, aided and abetted by the bushfire equivalent of the terrorist. He's called the arsonist. Setting bush ablaze, the act of a terrorist, says Piers Akerman. The tragic toll from Victoria's horrific weekend bushfires is already greater than that of Australian deaths in the two Bali bombing attacks of 2002 and 2005. Yet we know less about the homegrown terrorists responsible than we do about the Balinese bombers. And in my comment to that, to say that an individual or a group is behind it when we don't yet know it is risible. It sounds like someone has been listening to the cool, collected, calming thoughts of Rudd. It's mass murder! In fact, the police may know who some of the firebugs are, and maybe some of them are Muslim, but that doesn't mean it is an Islamic plot. Instead, there are idiots that claim Islam and other idiots that accept them. Regardless of who, the buck stops with those responsible, and that should absolve Rudd. The state and federal government are not only responsible for the rundown infrastructure, more so the states, but also they are planning to not improve it. And from Tim Blair, voices needed. Just as they used Hurricane Katrina, warminists are prepared to use Australia's fires. I'm an American climate activist. My heart goes out to all suffering this devastation. I also appeal to you to tell your stories in blogs or wherever you can. We need your voices to help get climate change laws and treaties passed. Americans don't understand the harsh reality of global warming coming to us all. From Karen of San Francisco. Thank you for your kind thoughts, Karen. From Andrew Bolt. Worse and worse. The death toll of Victoria is now 166. It's just so shocking. Police are said to be close to catching the arsonist behind the Churchill fire, at least. But what's also overwhelming is the flood of help. There is more donated food for the homeless than can be used. Donations are pouring in, with the corporations alone donating $14 million already. The Red Cross has been so flooded with people wanting to donate blood that they told me they couldn't book in until next week at the earliest. In our worst times, we realize the good that keeps us together. Ove protected. Well, that sure was a waste of my time, says Andrew Bolt. Australian story staff repeatedly told me they really did want me on their show to explain why I doubted Professor Ove Hugh Goldberg's constant warnings that the Great Barrier Reef was doomed. They knew my argument because they'd read the article in which I'd put it. They knew it because I put it twice more in front of their cameras, including to Ove's face where he had the chance to answer it. Far from answering it, Ove, on camera, conceded some of my criticism. And yet, none of that made it to air tonight. Not a word of how so many of his scary predictions had not come true. Instead, Australian Story ran yet more of his predictions, along with spooky music to make you extra scared, and some mild words from me about his being a scaremonger, without any explanation about why I reached that conclusion, when his wife, his best friend, and some science allies thought him a genius. But here is the case against believing his scariest warnings, the case Australian Story did not put, despite telling me that was precisely the thing it was most interested in having. In 1999, Ove warned that the Great Barrier Reef was under pressure from global warming, and much of it had turned white. In fact, he later admitted the reef had made a surprising recovery. In 2006, he warned high temperatures meant between 30 and 40% of coral on Queensland's Great Barrier Reef could die within a month. In fact, he later admitted this bleaching had a minimal impact. In 2007, he warned that temperature changes of the kind caused by global warming were again bleaching the reef. In fact, the Coral Reef Monitoring Network in December said there had been no big damage to the reef caused by climate change in the 4 years since its last report, and veteran diver Ben Kropp said that in 50 years he'd seen none at all. None of that was mentioned, yet it goes to the heart of Ove's credibility. None of what was mentioned, even though Ove had the opportunity to rebut it, if he could, and show his only film critic to be a fool, nor, incidentally, was a single one of the scientists who have publicly disagreed with Ove filmed, either, although I named at least 3 of them on camera. Doom boom, consider it a tax on stupidity. Tracking endangered wildlife in politically troubled impoverished Zimbabwe might not seem the ideal holiday spot, but it's in hot demand in the travel industry's latest niche market, tourism of doom. The term was coined by sector specialists for the growing number of travelers flocking to far-flung corners of the planet to see the endangered natural wonders before they disappear. Mr. Shapiro said travel agent reports that clients are increasingly requesting trips to see the melting glaciers of the Antarctic, the threatened coral of Australia's Great Barrier Reef, or Tanzania's Mount Kilimanjaro before it loses its ice cap. How we'll laugh when they demand their money back 20 years from now. John Howard on the greatness of George Bush. John Howard in The Spectator, let me advance 2 reasons why history should judge the presidency of George W. Bush to have been a success. The first is he took the action necessary to prevent another attack on America after the 11th of September 2001. The second is of special significance to Australia. His foreign policy helped bring a lot of calm stability to the Asia-Pacific region. The full essay is there if you follow the link. Oh, and he adds this at the end. Finally, a word on approval ratings as a measure of political achievement. Just about every anti-Bush column I have read recently has referred to his low approval ratings, as if they alone put paid to any contrary viewpoint. Harry Truman's approval ratings were similar to those of Bush when the former ended his presidency in '52, yet history now judges Truman to have been a very successful president. There are many who argue that he has been the best Democrat occupant of the White House since Roosevelt. The 41st president, George Herbert Walker Bush, had an approval rating of 89% in March '91. Less than 2 years later, he lost convincingly to Bill Clinton. Margaret Thatcher, unquestionably Britain's greatest prime minister since Churchill, had a satisfaction rating of just 20% in March 1990, a few months before she was pushed out by her own colleagues. The list is quite long. The only surprise is that so many commentators should base their assessments on such superficial analyses. Lancet does it again. Lancet didn't just get the death toll in Iraq wildly and suspiciously wrong in its eagerness to damn George Bush. It managed even to publish a dangerously wrong and deeply suspect paper in which it's at least meant to be expert. Back where they were, but bloodier. Former Tehran correspondent Angus McDowell asks, 30 years on, was the revolution in Iran worth it? It turns out, in fact, that the pattern of this revolution followed the same deadly script of so many yet before it.